Hi there everyone, this is Charlie over at ManyGeek, and today I want to talk to you about comics. And no, not the superhero comics, as much as I love Captain America, X-Men, and all the other things that were a big part of my childhood. I'd like to focus on another childhood comic love of mine, and that was the good old-fashioned Sunday and daily funnies. All of these great newspaper comics that were a huge part of who I am today. And really today, I want to focus on the one and the only comic that was a big part of my growing up, and I'm sure other folks in my generation, those who are a little older than me, can relate to how much they love this comic. And that is Calvin and Hobbes by Bill Watterson. This is truly one of the most spectacular comics that has ever been created, alongside Peanuts by Charles Schulz. Really, these two comics, especially Calvin and Hobbes, are a big part of why I am the geek that I am today. You see, the thing that kind of set a comic like Calvin and Hobbes apart from the Spider-Mans and the Dr. Rex Morgan, MD, and the Judy Parkers, or whatever other soaps and superheroes were out there, was that these kind of comics were accessible. You see, you looked at them even as a kid, and you realized, I might be able to draw that. And I know a lot of us did. Some of us would gather tracing paper, or we'd do the old trick with silly putty where you could pull up the page on the comic book and transfer it lightly over to another piece of paper, and you'd trace, and you'd figure out how to create them. As a matter of fact, in elementary school, I actually went through some cartooning classes. I can't say I'm any good today, but it was a big part of my geekdom. Because you see, one of the big things within the whole world of being a geek is the creation process. Like right now, I'm shooting this very video because I love the creation process that comes along with geekdom. That's why there's fan fiction, there's people out there creating their own comics and taking the storylines that were created by other people and developing new characters within them, or telling new stories with old characters. That's the coolest thing about a comic like Calvin and Hobbes, is it was so accessible, and I was able to do stuff within its world on my own. I could do my own Spaceman Spiff creations, and that was a really incredible feeling as a child. Of course, the other important factor was Calvin and Hobbes, they saw the world a little bit differently than, say, Garfield, who views it through Mondays and lasagnas and Normal and Odie. Well, Calvin and Hobbes viewed the world a little bit more philosophically, much like the characters in Peanuts. There were semi-serious discussions and adult themes. And that's why I still love Calvin and Hobbes today, and why it was such a big part of my childhood. You see, if I were to go, and I will be rereading Calvin and Hobbes today, I would get a whole different point of view out of it. I would find stories that I never saw before, themes that I was never capable of identifying. And that's the real joy in something that has been created so lovingly and so well as Bill Watterson created Calvin and Hobbes, is there are layers to it. And every time you go back and you reread it, you get a new experience. Something different speaks to you today. As opposed to your average Sunday funny where, yeah, you may find the punchline amusing, but a punchline wears out over time. But an actual theme and an actual discussion, those are the kinds of things that last a lifetime. Because every day you're experiencing life in a new way. You see, Calvin and Hobbes was the ultimate gateway for me to get involved in this creation process and to think about the world a little bit differently. And that's why it's had such a huge impact on me today. And that's not even to talk about the characters themselves. Calvin's imagination and ingenuity and inquisitiveness are all a big part, I think, of my personality today. I feel like I was made a different person because I had these experiences alongside Calvin and his trusty tiger pal Hobbes. I really love and feel for these characters. These days, whenever I hear someone complaining about something, I'll tell them, don't worry about it, it builds character. For those of you who know, and for those of you who don't, that's a reference to Calvin's dad, who, whenever Calvin would complain about having to shovel snow or do some other household chore, his dad would say, don't worry, it builds character. And that was such a big thing about having a kid. You're hearing adults talk about all of these things like building character and missing home and losing out on their childhood, and Calvin has this attitude of, well, why? Is that required? You know, is character some magical thing that makes me a better person just because I've shoveled snow? Or, you know, do I really have to lose out on my childhood? Can't I be a kid forever? And that is part of the creative process. The creative process keeps you a kid forever because you get excited over shooting a video, writing a comic. And that's what a guy like Bill Watterson did. He shared his creativity, his insight, his philosophy, and I honestly think a little bit of his love with the world through Calvin and Hobbes. Look, if you've got any young kids, or you're a youngin' watching this video yourself, or you just kind of missed the days of old, pick up a copy of Calvin and Hobbes. You can find them on Amazon. Maybe your local bookstore still carries some of the anthologies. I know I've got every single one stashed away. Read through it. You'll view the world just a little bit differently, in a little bit more positive light, and you realize that everything that you thought was possible as a kid is still possible today. And that's a big thing of geekdom. Things are still possible. You can still do cool things. There are still more worlds to explore, just like the world of Spaceman Spiff. So if you've liked this and want to see more videos from us, you can subscribe above, you can like us below. And of course, if you have a comic that you really liked as a kid, or you just want to chime in about Calvin and Hobbes, leave a comment below. I love to hear from you guys. Alright, I'm Charlie Mann over at ManyGeek. Go read more comics.